Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Black History Town Hall series. We're excited tonight and in the weeks to come to present to you an honest conversation about those things that we as African Americans are concerned about, and even some of the myths that we have and how we can clear those myths up. Tonight, we're excited to talk about the area of Black Lives Matter, but does it matter to us? There are a lot of myths out there. We're concerned, we're passionate about how we're treated by others, especially by the police and other cultures. But how do we care about our own selves? How do we feel when we do wrong to one another? Matter of fact, we're going to even explore tonight the myth by some who believe and don't believe that there is or is not any Black on Black crime. We're going to look at interracial dating. We're going to look at light skin versus dark skin. We're going to look at a lot of issues tonight as we deal with this whole concept of Black Lives Matter, but does it matter to us? So let's open up with prayer, and then I'm going to turn it over to our moderators for the evening. Pray with me. Father, we thank you this evening for allowing us this time to gather. Thank you, Lord, for the concept of this Black History Town Hall series, where we can have honest dialogue around those issues that concern the Black community. Lord, we pray that you would be in it, of course. You would guide our tongue, guide our thoughts, and that, Lord, whatever we do, whatever we say, you, of course, would get the glory and the honor. We thank you now, Lord, for those who have joined us, those who will soon join. And we pray for this panelists of young people and panelists of senior folk who will come with their ideas and opinions. Pray for them, oh God, as they speak truth to power. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen. All right, I'm going to turn it over at this time to our moderators for the evening. Amen.
Good evening, everyone. My name is LaShawn DeVille, and I am a member of Sharon Bible Fellowship. I'm one of the deaconess. I serve on the social media team as well as the women's ministry team. And in the community, I've been an elementary school teacher, an ESOL teacher specifically, for the past 24 years. So I'm very happy to be here and excited about this town hall.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I am Malia DeVille. I'm also a member of Sharon Bible Fellowship. I work for a nonprofit in DC called the National Partnership for Women and Families that works to advocate on behalf of women, particularly women of color, by advancing progressive legislation. So now we're going to toss it to our panelists to tell you a little bit about themselves. We're going to start with Kyle.
Thank you for the beautiful introduction. My name is Kyle Quarles. I am a solution specialist for a company called Nauticon Office Solutions. Outside of that, I am a football coach and a father of two. And so these subjects and topics tonight will definitely be hit home a little bit for me, just because I am a Black male and I am raising two Black, beautiful little boys. So that's me.
Malika, do you want to go next?
Good evening, everyone. I am Malika Turner. I am a pharmacist and currently a clinical assistant professor at Howard University College of Pharmacy. Like Kyle, I am very passionate about this subject matter and serve on a couple of different diversity task force and things like that. So I'm excited and grateful that you all welcomed me here tonight.
Thank you. Miss Lori Bonds.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Lori Bonds. I am an attorney. I am a proud graduate of Hampton University and Howard University School of Law. I'm married. My husband is a police officer in Washington, D.C. I, too, work in D.C. and actually I'm a vice president for contracts and procurement at a government agency. So you would imagine we have very interesting conversations at home about obviously what happens and what goes on in our community, especially as we are raising a young daughter and son here. I'm also a member of Sharon Bible Fellowship Church and excited about the opportunity tonight.
Thank you. Leah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am also a graduate of the Hampton University. I went to a historically Black college and university. I went to, for at least half of high school, a predominantly Black high school. I live in a predominantly Black county. So a lot of these issues directly impact us and a lot of people on the panel. I'm currently serving as a program specialist for the Department of Human Services and the Family Services Administration Unit. And I basically help people who are looking for stability with housing. I work directly with the landlords to get them very suitable housing so that we're helping people get out of shelters and just find, some support with their housing. But I'm very excited to be on the panel tonight. A lot of these topics definitely, like I said, hit home. And just getting into the public service sector, I mentor a lot of teens who also are directly impacted by a lot of these conversations tonight. So excited to be here.
Thank you. And Christina, do you want to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Good evening, everybody. Please excuse my tardiness as we are trying to get a 6-month-old to bed. So you may or may not see him, whether or not he cooperates tonight. So my name is Christina Jones. I am currently the Special Counsel for Strategic Youth Initiatives for the Office of the Attorney General for the District of Columbia. I have been a prosecutor prior to this role for the last 8 years in both Prince George's County and in the District of Columbia. I primarily focused on juvenile court and making sure that kids who come into the system are supported by the system, which is what is supposed to happen, and that we're not just pushing kids into the system just because. Specifically also focusing on sexual assault and the laws around consent in both Maryland and DC. I went to Hampton, but then left, and then went to Howard, HU. I'm sorry. So I am also First Lady of Zion Church Woodbridge, which is a multi-site of Zion Church. And I was a member, I'm a claimant. I was a member of Sharon for like 6 months, a solid, strong 6 months. And then I got married, so I had to go with my husband, boo. But happy to be here and happy to discuss these important issues.
Great, thank you. So as you all can see, we have some really strong panelists tonight with lots of various perspectives. We're going to set a couple of ground rules. First, for our audience, we will be accepting questions from the audience, but we ask that you please use the Q&A feature for questions, and the moderators will try their best to get to as many of those as we can. If you put your question in the chat, we might miss it. So if you want your question to be answered, please use the Q&A feature. We'll be monitoring that. Also, we ask of our panelists if you could try to keep your responses to 2 minutes, so that way we can get through as many topics as possible tonight. That would be great.
And with that, we're going to jump right in. We are super excited and proud of you all and your experience. So we're going to start with the topic tonight of education and athletes. So kind of put that in your head. Our first question tonight talks about public education. And we know that public education has the responsibility of educating all children at the same level or quality, but we know that doesn't happen. So we want to ask, what do you think is our responsibility in making sure all children, especially our children, receive an equitable education? And we can start with, as you're thinking about that, maybe Christina, Malika, or whoever wants to jump right in.
So I'll jump in. So I think when we're thinking about education equity, we have to think about both race, gender, class, socioeconomic factors. You can't just separate one thing from all of the intersections that we have as people. So I am a woman. I am African American. I identify as a heterosexual woman. Those are things that define me. And you really have to look at I am an upper class woman. You have to look at the intersection when you're thinking about equity. And I think it is on us to individually look at how we're contributing to the equity in the system, I think we all have a part to play, whether it's at work, whether it's with our own children or children who are in our village. One of the things that I really look at is equity in terms of the digital divide, and looking at what are we doing to make sure that all of our students have the tools that are necessary to not only just survive, but to thrive. We know that when we don't have equity in school systems, we have these really wide achievement gaps. I'm actually on the board of a public charter school. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure was that all of our kids had devices so that we didn't see the issues around whether or not someone had access to a laptop, whether or not someone had access to a hotspot. And I think it's on every single one of us have a responsibility to get involved with organizations who are doing the work. We all don't have to do the work necessarily. I don't have to be on the ground, but I can identify an organization that is out distributing hotspots and donate to that organization. Or if maybe I don't have the money, donate my time to help distribute those hotspots. So I think it's important for us to really see what are we good at and what relationships do we have to make sure that the kids, not only who we are directly in charge of, but in our community have what they need. We all have a part to play.
I like that. Thank you, Christina. Anybody else want to elaborate on our responsibility to public education?
I will. I think that we do ultimately have a responsibility to our kids for public education. I'm a product of public education, although my children are in private school right now. And we are residents of Prince George's County, Maryland, which is the largest county of middle-class African Americans. And yet we don't feel comfortable with our children in public schools. And that's a sad statement to say, not to say that they could not thrive, but we just felt more comfortable with them being in private school. The scores, the testing, it just appeared that it was a better location for them. However, we're paying for it, right? So people are making decisions about where they live, where they may move to because of the school systems. And it should not be the case. There's no question that there is still a deep divide between, again, schools that do have, as Christina mentioned, devices, access to technology, STEM classes, things that we know are advantages that should not be something that separates kids. That everyone should be able to have the same opportunity. However, there is no question. I was used to tutor at a school in Washington, D.C. And at that time, I want to say the president at that time was Clinton, but they still had books that showed the president was Reagan. It didn't make sense. The fact that, again, there's so much information that the kids can't get because of the fact that, again, as adults, even if we don't have kids, we have to advocate. We have to advocate once we realize that there are issues that we will and we do need to do as much as we can to make sure that it's not because some new group of people move into an area that all of a sudden they demand that things change. We've got to demand the changes too. And we have to be heard and make sure that we're heard just as much as some other folks that we see are able to come and make decisions and make things change and push.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that. So I heard we have to donate our time, donate to organizations, and that we need to advocate whether our children are in public or in private school. All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to add one thing. I also think is important, even if you don't have kids currently, attend the education council meetings in your communities, because at some point you may have kids and you want to see what the decisions are currently, because they're going to affect you in the future. So like Lori said, if you know that maybe the schools aren't the best in your area right now, do something about it right now, because you can.
Right.
Volunteer your time with them. Go attend school board meetings. See exactly what's going on and actually be an active participant. They're all open to the public. And right now, one of the beauties of the pandemic is they're all accessible via YouTube. So you can watch them live, submit questions, and really challenge your representatives to make sure they're giving the kids their quality education, whether or not you have a kid in the system currently or not, or you'll be paying for it later because you weren't investing in them now.
All right. We're going to shift now to higher education. So over the summer, we saw a trend of top Black high school athletic recruits opting to choose HBCUs over predominantly white institutions. And I know we have a couple of athletes on the panel tonight. So I was wondering if you all could explain the significance of this and how you think HBCUs can maintain the momentum to keep attracting top talent.
I can start off, and then I know Miss Lori wanted to chime in, but I know you gave me 2 minutes, but it's a big topic, so bear with me. I don't want to be too long-winded. Again, my name is Kyle, and I'm originally from Georgia. And growing up in Georgia, football for us was life. And when I say life, I mean everything that we did revolved around football. If we wanted to make good grades, we made good grades because of football. When we took out the trash, we took out the trash so we wouldn't get in trouble for football. And so for me, I just use football as an example because it's a sport, but that's for all sports around in Georgia, in the South, and around the country. I mean, you see it a lot. But I actually went to a predominantly white institute, and I'll explain what that is in a minute for those on the call that may not know what that is, because you have HBCUs and you have predominantly white institutes. And then I'll touch on the Power Five conferences and why you're starting to see a shift with Jackson State and Deion Sanders and his son, who's a top recruit that ended up going to Jackson State for his father. But and obviously because he's Black and he wants to represent for HBCUs and then set a standard. But there's a part that I think a lot of people missed in that aspect as to how he was able to go and why he ended up going, that people I think overlook. So for me, just to speak on it, I would have never went to a predominantly white institute if, in fact, I did not play sports. And I want to make that clear because growing up in Georgia, there's a lot of HBCUs around. You have Clark Atlanta, you have Fort Valley State University, Alabama State, that's, the next state over, obviously, and Alabama A&M. So there's a lot of universities, HBCU universities around there that have really loved to have gone to if, in fact, I didn't play sports. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute as well. But for those that don't understand the dynamics of sports and what we talk about for HBCUs in regards to predominantly white institutes, when it talks about sports, there's two reasons why top athletes or athletes in general go to these predominantly white institutes. And it's really two reasons only. One is likeness. One is notoriety. Well, it's notoriety, and then I would say resources, so to speak. Going to predominantly white institutes coming out of high school allows you to ultimately try to achieve your goal if you're playing sports to get to that next level. Some people may disagree, but the statistics will show that if you go to a predominantly white institute as an athlete, you're able to get more notoriety at your particular sport because you're on ESPN every Saturday. You get noticed more by scouts every weekend. I'll talk about that and why that is in a minute. And with that, when you go to these predominantly white institutes over these HBCUs, there's more resources involved and money that's poured into those schools for your weight training classes, for your meal prep classes, for your books and education, so to speak, wherever that may be, wherever you're trying to learn for the athletes, in general. And so my reasoning for going to a predominantly white institute was not because I didn't want to go to HBCU, but I knew it would give me a better opportunity to go to the NFL, which was my ultimate goal, which I achieved. So I'm speaking from experience. I did have offers from Alabama State, Alabama A&M. I had some, FAMU offers, but they all went away once the predominantly white institute started to offer me. And I'll talk about that in a minute as well. It's a big topic. And the reason why they stopped offering me and talking to me is because they felt like they could not compete with the Dukes and the Wake Forest universities and the University of Kentucky's, the UConns and Maryland's, which I had a scholarship to about 4 or 5 of those. And then obviously I had Southern Miss and a lot of Southern State schools. And so for those that don't know what HBCU is, you have a wide variety. You have Winston-Salem State, North Carolina, A&T, Howard, Hampton, that we just mentioned, South Carolina State. So those are your HBCUs. And then I'll just speak on the Power Five conferences to give people understanding what we're talking about from a revenue perspective. Because when you turn on ESPN, these are the schools that you see. And so you have Pac-12, that's your Western schools, your Western colleges, your predominantly white institutes, and that's your Oregons, your Oregon States, UCLA, Cal Berkeley, Arizona States, and then you move towards the Big 12, which they only have 10 teams, but that's sort of your Southern Texas states going up towards the Midwest. And so you have, your Kansas States, your Texas Tech, TCU, Oklahoma States. So I'm pretty sure you all see those on TV a lot. And then you have your ACC, which is the Athletic Coastal Conference, which most of us are familiar with, your Wake Forests, your Dukes, Florida, Florida State, Clemson, Boston College, just basically all the schools up the East Coast, UNC, North Carolina State. You have your Big Ten, which most of us cheer for, Maryland, Penn State, Ohio State, Rutgers, Michigan State. And then the best conference is the Southeastern Conference. And these conferences all play a big role from a sports perspective to drive revenue, not only for their schools, but for HBCUs as well. And I talk about the pandemic and how that kind of affected the schools from a financial standpoint. But the Southeastern Conference, which is the Southern Conference, those are your major universities, your blue blood, so to speak, your Alabamas, Texas A&M, LSU, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, Kentucky, Missouri. And so understanding that people see these schools a lot on TV and you very rarely see the HBCUs, that's a major reason why these top athletes are able to go, or the reason why they choose to go to predominantly white institutes over HBCUs. I'm 100% sure if the revenue driven into HBCUs was a lot greater or somewhat close to these predominantly white institutes, that a lot of us, meaning Black African Americans, would go to these HBCUs. But the simple fact that it isn't is the reason why they don't go. And so to speak on Deion Sanders and Jackson State, that's what we need more of. We need more of guys like Deion Sanders, ex-Pro Bowlers, ex-Hall of Famers, taking jobs at these HBCUs in order to drive the young African Americans to these HBCUs. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, you cannot expect a 17 or 18-year-old child that is playing sports that wants to make it to the NFL in this day and time to make a decision to be a trendsetter or a trailblazer, so to speak, to go to an HBCU when he's not financially stable or we never had anything. And I'll speak on that in a minute. And so when we talk about Shakir, I think his name is Shakir Sanders, which is Deion Sanders' son, the reason why he was able to go to Jackson State, the reason why it was beneficial for him was because one reason is he's already financially stable. His dad was financially stable. And so most of the better kids or more athletic kids that you see around the nation that these predominantly white institutes use for likeness at their schools, the Clemsons, the Alabamas, they come from inner city neighborhoods, mom or dad's probably maybe on welfare or, lower class parents, lower income kids that have been running around in the streets all day with their shoes off, Pahokee, Florida, playing football their whole life. And when these white universities, so to speak, come to their house, they tell them that you're going to be able to fly on planes, in opposed to HBCUs that take buses to their games. Just imagine being on a bus from North Carolina State to Alabama State. That's a long ride, on a bus. And so when they say stuff like that, and when they offer you, a free education and tuition and everything's paid for. And not only that, depending on what university is recruiting you, if it's LSU, Alabama, it's not legal, but they will drop a nice little bag of money off to your parents and allow them to, get on their feet a little bit. And so who's going to turn that down? And so the dynamic shift that needs to happen, it needs to change. It has to start with people like me, so to speak, or people that are passionate about sports that won't take the ESPN job to be a commentator, right? But they will go back and take a job at HBCU to bring or to drive the young kids there to want to go there. Because these big universities, predominantly white institutes, use our likeness for their revenue. And not only do they do that, they play schools for fluff games, so to speak, the HBCUs as a fluff game in order to get prepared for the bigger games against other predominantly white institutes. And when they play those teams, those HBCUs, they pay them. They give them, $60, $70, $80,000 for them to come up, to get beat up on, to go back home. But they use that money for tuition for their kids for the school. They use that money for, building and repairs for the buildings at the HBCUs. And so when the pandemic hit, they did conference play. And when they did conference play, the HBCUs weren't allowed to play against the predominantly white institutes because of, the scarce of obviously catching COVID-19. And so it kind of hurt and limited a lot of the schools from, keeping some of their sports programs open. That's why Bowie State and a lot of other programs didn't have football team this year, but Ohio State was able to because of the revenue that's driven through the school. And so my thought process on it and what I know that has to happen is there has to be a conversation with parents like me in my household, with my children, to talk about what they really want to do as far as, education, because I'm guilty of it. And the reason why I'm guilty of it, and I'll tell you why I'm guilty of, is talking to my children about what college they want to go to, but never mention the HBCUs. I don't mention HBCUs because of what I know a predominantly white institute did for me on the football field in regards to what I wanted to accomplish. It's a conversation that needs to be had. It's a conversation that I need to start having with my children in order to see a change, because like I told one of my coworkers the other day, I'm sorry I'm long-winded, y'all, but I gotta get out.
I do want to say that we do have a question from the chat that I want to hold time to get to too. And I'll give you 20 seconds to wrap it up, and then we're going to pass it on to Ms. Lori.
I'll wrap it up. But just going back to my point I made earlier, it's a lot. I mean, I have a lot more things to talk about, but I won't. But just going back to my point earlier, it's going to have to take a lot more top athletes, so to speak, to want to go to HBCUs. And so then that will force ESPN and Fox Sports to have to play these teams or these HBCUs on TV and give these guys a warm and fuzzy feeling that they will have an opportunity, a fair opportunity, so to speak, as the other kids that are going to Texas and Oklahoma to, make it to their dream destination. And even if they don't make it, it'll allow them to, us to get back our likeness and feed money and revenue into our schools rather than, the schools that are just giving us scholarship money, but making $40 million off of us per game per year, basically, and then, dishing it back to wherever they want to dish it to. So what was the question? And going all day.
So Miss Lori, I want to give you the opportunity to answer that question, but also think about this one that we got from a viewer that says there are a number of HBCUs that have left Black conferences and predominantly white conferences. Do you think these decisions open up the potential for being recruited by professional teams?
Oh, absolutely. So you definitely see.
Well, I'm going to let Miss Lori answer first. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, Miss Lori. I was about to go. My bad, Miss Lori. We on Facebook Live. How y'all? Shoot, on Facebook Live.
It's okay.
Go ahead, Miss Lori.
You have been presenting, and I agree with everything you said. And clearly, you're presenting from the perspective of a football player, right? Football is clearly the money generated revenue source of, again, all sports. Clearly, again, I didn't play football. I ran track. I played volleyball. But that wasn't the reason I went to the school. I didn't get recruited from high school to go play, right? It wasn't the same situation. I wanted to go to a predominantly white school, but my grandmother was insistent that I go to an HBCU. She said it will be life-changing, that it's a place that, again, I can feel comfortable. I can be around like-minded people. I can be around other brown people who are working just as hard, if not harder, to try to inspire me to do what I want to do, if not more. She also felt that, again, and my grandmother was a guidance counselor and an English teacher. So she felt that, again, not only will the education be the same, if not better, but again, you feel you have the feeling of being encouraged, supported by the teachers, by the institution itself, as well as the students. And she was right. My time at Hampton, I would not have traded it for anything. It was the best. And what I say to my son, who's a senior in high school this year, and unfortunately because of COVID, did not have the opportunity, right, to play football like some of the other jurisdictions did and get that exposure. But what I say is, again, sometimes socially, again, college is the opportunity for you to grow, not only from an educational perspective, but also socially. It's also when you become an adult, you learn more about yourself and what you want. And if it's more of a situation where you've got so many issues that are there in front of you that keep you from being able to grow, like racism, like feeling like you're not comfortable where you are, it does impact you. Now, there's no question, Hampton University is one of the schools that's changed conferences and has gone to a predominantly white conference. It is not fun anymore. Part of what you do when you go to a HBCU is you enjoy the camaraderie, the fellowship, the fun, the homecomings. It's about, again, being able to see people, get dressed up, be able to go out, see everyone. It's an experience. It's an experience, and you enjoy the experience. And you can't get that if now you're playing some random school somewhere that it may be great. Nothing against the school, but you don't have the same rivalry as you do a Hampton, Norfolk State. I mean, it's a difference that you can't put, again, your finger on, and you can't be able to explain it if you haven't gone there. But to people who can relate more to, again, big rivalries, it's the Duke, North Carolina basketball. It's the Ravens against the Steelers. It's that kind of thing that you lose. And a lot of people, again, lose the joy, the fun out of going, because that's part of why you get excited. You notice more. A lot of times when they show, again, as Kyle was referencing, some of the HBCUs playing, the predominantly white schools, they focus on halftime to show the bands for the black schools, right? They don't look a lot at the game itself, but when it's halftime, they want to be able to see what our bands look like, what the majorettes look like, what the girls are doing when they're dancing, because that's really where the entertainment is, because that's what we like to see too. But that's not what they focus on at the other schools. But again, losing that, it is a big difference. And it is all for the money. There's no question about it. It's for the money. It's for the exposure. More too for the school. Less, I think, for the kids who are actually playing. I think it's more for the school than anything else, because there are a lot of kids who are getting the opportunity to play at the next level, whether it's NFL, whether it's NBA, because they are being seen more, just because there is so much exposure. As Kyle said, ESPN is going everywhere now. They're not just limiting it as much as they used to, and there's so many more opportunities. So, we do lose out in the answer to the question. I don't agree with it. Not to say that we should stay in a bubble and that we have to stay restricted and only play the schools that are in our conference. We can play outside schools, but it doesn't have to mean that we have to lose and leave the conference in order to be able to do it. Sorry, I was long-winded too. Sorry.
No, it's fine. You guys are the experts on this, so we're coming to you for your words. So thank you. I do want to, you mentioned the next level and the opportunities for athletes at the next level. And so we wanted to ask all the panelists, Black athletes have long been advocates of racial equity, from Jesse Owens to Colin Kaepernick. And most recently, over the past summer, we saw a lot of demonstrations from basketball players, both in the NBA and WNBA, wearing T-shirts, making statements. So I wanted to get the panelists' thoughts. What are your thoughts on athletes as social justice advocates? And do you think that today's athletes are doing enough? What could they do more of, if anything?
I can start it real quick. I am taking my promise, but I'm all for it. I love it. I believe in it. And the reason why is because when you look at sports is one of the only things in America or nationally or worldwide that brings every single race somewhat together. You will see, Black people, white people, old people, young people, all wearing Ravens jerseys, Steelers jerseys, or Alabama jerseys, or, North Carolina A&T jerseys when they get the white people that come over, right? And so sports brings everybody together, and it's an opportunity for the professional athletes to not only make a stand or make a statement, but it allows other people to be unified. And so if there's not a bigger platform than that, I don't know what is. If you look at hip hop, there's only a certain amount of people that really listen to hip hop, even though they drive the culture. But everybody watches sports, no matter if it's golf, baseball, soccer, whatever it may be. It just allows people to really understand that our voice matters, and we're not going for it, basically, so to speak, right? So I love it. I love the Bronx movement. I love what he stands for. He's somewhat totally different than a Michael Jordan, but you got to remember, people bash Michael Jordan a lot, but we're in different times now. Back then, you never know what he was going through. He might have been scared that his voice was going to shut out. He might have got canceled out from the NBA. But LeBron knows what he stands for. He understands his value, understands his purpose, and he's not budging for anybody. And I'm for it. I love it. So that's my take on it.
I was going to chime in and say, I think it was LeBron, where he made a comment or a statement about the injustice that's been going on, and the response was just shut up and dribble. And I think that whole concept that, we're good enough to bring in revenue through basketball, football, all these major sports. But when it comes to something that directly impacts us because of, the color of our skin, we're not allowed to talk about it publicly, but we're still allowed to generate and bring in money. So I think that whole idea of not being able to speak on something that directly impacts me, whether, no matter what my public stance is on that, I think it's wrong. So I think the fact that LeBron and other players, did make those stands and, kneeling to protest in any way that we feel like is going to be impactful. I think we have every single right to do that. Just like, they want us to go out and play. If it's something that affects us, we're not robots. We're not going to just go out and do it because that's what we get paid to do. And I think that is something that I would like to see even more. I think there's a good amount, but there's always room for more of these prominent athletes to step up and speak out about that, and let it not be about the money. Be able to say, you know what, I'm willing to be fined this game to prove a point. So I think that if we continue to go down that path, and that's the best way that they can protest, I'm in full support of that.
I just was going to kind of piggyback off of what both of them has said, and just say that I think that it's everybody's responsibility to stand their ground, especially now, right? So I think the fact that they have these fantastic, gigantic platforms to do so is extremely impactful, because it's reaching everybody the same way that even if my voice is only reaching 2 people, it's still my responsibility to be a voice to those 2 people. So I think it's very, because again, money's on the line, all those types of things. I think it's great that they're doing it, but it's also, their responsibility, as it is everyone's responsibility, to kind of stand their ground and stand up for what they believe.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Over the summer, we know, I'm going to shift lanes just a little bit. Over the summer, there was a lot of social unrest, and didn't start it, but as we piggyback on what we were talking about with the T-shirts and the crime that has been going on, we want to shift to that topic. And I want to read you some statistics and get your thoughts on these. The Bureau of Justice published a report in 2019 about crime statistics, and it showed that those who commit violent crimes tend to commit them against members of the same race. So it says 62% of crimes committed against white victims were by white offenders. 45% of crimes committed against Hispanic victims were committed by Hispanic offenders. And 70% of crimes committed against Black people were committed by Black offenders. So we want to talk about the phrase Black on Black crime and why that's so overused and viewed as like the most horrendous of crimes. Because if we talk about domestic terror, we never hear about the white people and white on white crime, So just want to get your thoughts on the phrase Black on Black crime. Do you think it's overused? Do you think it's a myth? Who would like to speak to that?
I'll just quickly say, because I know that we have some law people in the room that probably have a little bit better context, but I'll just say, I think literally your stats summarized it for all of us, right? That it is a myth literally based on statistics. And as a scientist inside, I'm like, there we go, problem solved. That's not really a question when the stats back it up, but I will definitely defer to our lawyers on the call.
Well, I'd like to say that there is seriously, again, Black on Black crime. It does exist. I think, again, some of those conversations I said that I have with my police officer husband is that we don't see them, right? So they happen, but on the news, you don't see maybe 2% of the crimes that actually occur every night, because they are in predominantly Black areas. And so they're not going to show you that news. They don't want you to see those kind of crimes happening in Washington, D.C., because that could impact house values. That could impact tourism. That could impact, again, the way people see and view the nation's capital. But it happens. Again, and it's unfortunate. And part of the conversation we were actually having was that, again, unfortunately, our folks don't see that as committing crimes in the same way. They don't see it as serious. They don't see the same way that someone would view, again, someone that's Caucasian having or committing a crime against someone who's African American. It's, I know I need to rob someone to get something, and it's easier for me to do it in my own neighborhood. It's okay for me to do it against my own people. They don't see it as even worse or something that, again, it's a crime. It shouldn't be occurring anyway. But the fact that they are taking away from their own people who are in the same, if not worse situation than they are in, and creating more of an issue. Again, a lot of it is systemic. I work at a housing authority that is responsible for, again, providing low income housing for individuals who are in public housing or use vouchers, or people consider, again, the Housing Choice Voucher Program, Section 8. And again, it's a terrible cycle, but people don't feel like they know how to get out of it. I'm sure Leah can speak to that as far as, again, folks who haven't been taught any better. They don't know. And so when people say they should know better, they really don't. They have not been taught. Even folks who, again, live in public housing, a lot of them think they're entitled to it. Instead of them thinking, I want to move forward and get education and do better, move out, they have not ever been exposed. So they don't know there's somewhere else to go. They don't know that there's somewhere else besides Northeast to be, that there's a Southeast and a Southwest, and they don't go. They don't go to other quadrants of their city, let alone get exposed to other places in the country or the world. And as a result, no, they don't think it's anything wrong with what they do, the type of crimes they commit, but it does exist. It happens. It requires, again, what we talked about, the advocacy, the education, the commitment to really try to be able to work with folks who are in those situations and who do need someone who cares, who can be able to help move them forward, because it is a problem and it exists. And we do need to talk about it more, because we shouldn't be only outraged, right, when we feel like, or we see it on TV, as if we don't see it. We shouldn't get desensitized when it only happens with our folks, We should make sure that it is just as big of an issue that we need to address as any other.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Anybody else want to weigh in?
So most crimes are in two buckets. They are either crimes of opportunity, like I see someone walking down the street and I want to rob them because I need money. Or we see them as random acts of violence. So think about a lot of your shootings, which are mostly targeted. Most people who commit crimes commit them in their own spheres, their own neighborhoods, with their own circles. And we don't really see a lot of races and socioeconomic statuses mixing. Like, you kind of can't divorce the race from the class issues. As a prosecutor for 8 years, it was very, very rare that I ever had victims who looked different from the offenders. It happened. It was very extremely rare. And I prosecuted in both Prince George's and Washington, D.C. It just doesn't happen because you don't have the opportunity to really be around people of other races or socioeconomic backgrounds, unless it's like a purse snatching on Metro, or we're looking at something where, you know, large groups of people are congregated together. You also have to think about not just people are committing crimes, but you have to get to the why. Most people don't commit crime just because they want to. They're doing it because either they have to. I literally have to feed my family. I had a case once where there was a young person who was committing burglaries, like a rash of burglaries. And when we were in court, he said, I am trying to feed my younger siblings. My mother is on crack. I cannot do this. Please lock me up because I'm tired. Like, he said he couldn't have been any older than 13 in court saying, I am tired. Get me out of this situation. So we really have to think about the why people are committing crimes, not just, you know, they're over there doing this, or, you know, we're over there doing this, but really focusing and drilling down into what is the reason for this person to feel like they have to commit this crime of opportunity or this random act of violence. So black on black crime is a real thing, but white on white crime is also a real thing. So we just have to really look at, like, who are we talking about when we're talking about people who commit criminal acts? I also hate saying criminals because I feel like the same reason people hate saying slaves, because I don't think people are defined by, you know, what they do or their circumstances. But you really have to think about why are people doing these things that we deem as socially unacceptable? And then why do we deem certain things as socially unacceptable? Yes, murders are bad. Yes, rapes are bad. Yes, assaults are bad. But if I don't have the money to feed my family, is me stealing from the grocery store or shoplifting, which I've prosecuted before, I've seen before, is that, yes, that's bad economically, but what are we doing as a society to prevent that from happening in the first place? What are we doing as a society to prevent child abuse cases? And we know people are volatile, and we know they need anger management, and we can see it with our own eyes, but we're allowing them to explode around children. Like, what are we doing as a society where we're breaking down that we can't actually help the people who are committing these crimes, that may just be doing them because of the situation they are in, the social economic status that they have, or maybe even the mental health issues that they have going on that we have stigmatized for the past several decades and are now just realizing that that's the genesis of a lot of what we see. So that's a very long answer to a very complicated question. Like that's not an easy question to answer, but black on black crime is real. It happens.
Thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts? Leah, I feel like I saw you nodding along. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that Christina just said. And I want to comment on something that Lori said earlier. A few years ago, when I was working on a different side of the DC government, we were working with customers that were receiving government assistance, the TANF program. And we were told at that point that, in some states, people are only on TANF. I think California is a maximum of 5 years. I might even be giving that too many years. But in DC, there was really no limit of how long you could be a government assistant. And so if you can imagine, you have generations of people who are receiving government assistance, meaning some cases, a daughter, a mother, a grandmother, a great grandmother that have never worked a full-time job because they've only received government assistance. So at that point, when I was working for the government, we were told that they were going to start cutting the government assistance off. And so at first you're thinking, okay, well, good, because, this is going to help them become more financially responsible. But if you're 45 years old and you've never worked a full-time job, you've never got into the routine of getting up in the morning, going to work, simple things, getting a paycheck, having a bank account, cashing a check, these normal things that are second nature to us. If you've never been in the habit of doing that, we're really setting you up for failure to just take it away without any type of resources or any type of guidance on how to do that. And it's deeply, deeply rooted. So going back to Christina's point, there's always a root of why we're seeing these cycles continuing to happen. And I mean, that's a very, we'll be here all night to really talk about, how to really fix that and different suggestions on that. But I just want to comment on the crime level. Working in the government and working with the population that we work with, it has truly opened my eyes. And, not to sound whatever, but the compassion level has gone way up, because a lot of times you see these things on the news and you hear these stories. And, when I first started working there, it's just like you turn your nose up to it. But when you start learning people's stories and you realize like the situation or the cards that they were dealt, it changes your perspective completely. And it's like, no, you don't agree. You never condone violence. You never condone, stealing or any of these things. But when you get to the root of the situation as to why it resulted in that, your mind completely changes for that. And I think that I'm fortunate enough to work in that field where I'm able to see the story and not just the consequence of what they did. So I think that, yes, I know there's different theories out there that black on black crime doesn't exist. I think the reality is it does. But kind of like what was already talked about, there are so many different things that we don't hear about. White people, Hispanic people, Asian people commit crimes every single day, but it's so targeted to Black people because I feel like that is something that is easy to talk about. Or whenever we want to stand up for social justice, we can't because a Black man murdered another Black man last night. So now that takes away our voice. But it's not fair to say that, to not speak on both. But I just think that, a lot. I love the question as to why, instead of just talking about how much of a disgrace it is, there's a reason. I just want to say one more thing. When we even talk about employment, because what I used to do is help fix barriers to get it. The whole point was to get you to be in a place where you were stable financially, mentally, employment. It was to get you to be stable. But the real way to do that was not to do everything for them, but to empower them to do it for themselves. But we learned when we were starting to talk about employment, which was a lot of the ultimate goal as well. We would have these job fairs, we would do seminars, do makeovers, and it was a beautiful experience. And then a week later, they're back in the office because they got fired. And we're like, what happened? Oh, well, I cursed out my boss because she wouldn't let me take off on Super Bowl Sunday. And then that made us realize, like, you know what, I'm not trying to be funny, but it just made you realize, like, there are so many, we can't just start here. we got to start from the root. We got to talk about those things of anger management, professionalism, getting to the root of mental health barriers in order for them to be complete. I don't even want to say them, for us to be completely successful of having a stable lifestyle. So, I mean, I could talk about that for hours, but I do agree that there is Black on Black crime, but also why is there Black on Black crime is the real question that we should be answering.
Thank you. And I want to follow up on something you said, Leah, talking about, police brutality, because often the phrase or the myth of Black on Black crime is used against us, and so I want to know, to deter us from speaking up on those kinds of issues. So I want to know, like, in your opinion, what do you think we can do as a community to better balance the urgency of the threat of police violence while still being advocates for all these other prevalent issues that are real, that we do have to address? And how can we build a stronger community to achieve that kind of self-sufficiency when we have, people throwing the Black on Black crime myth at us over and over again?
I mean, I think that is a loaded question. I think that there are a lot of different ways to tackle it. I think kind of similar to what Kyle had mentioned earlier about just more representation, with prominent athletes speaking up and working at those particular HBCUs, working with teens both in DC and when I was living in Chicago, literally working in some, rough areas. I think that is really important for a lot of the teens that are featured on the news with the quote unquote Black on Black crime and the gun violence. It's important for teens to speak up as well against gun violence. So I think that representation in that way for the population, that it not to say that it doesn't just affect teens, but a lot of this stuff, if you really read it, it's young adults. It's young adults with these the murders and the gun violence. And I think that a lot of it it's easy for older people to lead a march. I think it's really easy to be out there protesting, but I would like to see some of our younger generation out there protesting against guns as well. And I think that, again, that is deeply rooted, especially when you just talk about mentorship. And one thing that I've realized in mentorship, there's a lot of people mentoring, but I always, I'm an advocate for more Black men to mentor Black men. Make it healthy to show healthy relationships between a man and a man, and it not be anything more than that. And to really, let them know that, use your words. When I worked with teens in Chicago, it was so quick to just go in a fight, and that's how you ended it. But to have to sit them down in a situation room and talk about it and say, okay, listen, you can do anything, but you have to use your words. You can't use your hands. And it was difficult, but it taught them the first line of action is to discuss, hey, this bothered me. And I think a lot of times it goes back to that emotional intelligence to be able to talk out your problems, to be able to discuss things before you pick up a gun. And I'm just talking specifically on gun violence when I say that. And unfortunately, again, a lot of it is, is based on how you grew up. If you're not having these conversations at home first, it's difficult to start imparting that in school or in other places if that's not something that's been imparted in your household. So, to be honest with you, I think that's something that still has to be discussed. But I would just say off the top of my head, I would like to see more representation from our youth against violence, and not just having, older adults speak out against it. But I would like to see more rallies directly. They were all out there when it was George Floyd. But when it comes to gun violence, I want to see that same energy from that population.
I want to piggyback on something Leah said about kids being violent and fighting instead of using their words, which I think is totally valid and totally happens. And I think a lot of that too is the trauma that you've experienced growing up as a child and seeing that response from your parents. I know we in church, and I know church people love to say beat your kids, but that's how we end up with violent kids because they see when someone gets mad at me, they hit me. So they learn when I get mad at somebody, I hit them. This all goes back to when the master used to get mad at us, they hit us too. So we have to really think about the things that we say to our kids and the things that we ingrain in our kids young. I have a 6-month-old. I'm not an advocate for spanking because I don't want him to think it is healthy for me to discipline him in that way, because I don't want him to do it to anybody else. And I think sometimes we have to kind of relearn, not even relearn, but really look at what is the genesis of some of the things that we see in the Bible. And yes, while Proverbs does say, let's talk about the rod of discipline, that may not mean the actual rod. That just may mean you have to discipline your kids and make sure that they understand, why am I upset that you're doing this? What are your boundaries? What are the rules that I want you to follow? So then I'm not automatically picking up a belt when you don't do something and expecting you not to do that, not to be fighting in school when you're a teenager. You really have to think about what trauma are you giving to your kids, even with the best intentions? Because even if you think, this is going to help them in the long run, what response are you showing them in the short term? So that's just my 2 cents. I know we love the Bible because we in church, but that's just something to really, really think about as you're bringing up kids in these trauma informed ways.
And I know we're a little bit off now, going off topic, but I just want to be able to respond to Christina, because I hear you, I understand your position, but I respectfully disagree. Again, I think there's a difference between spanking your child and beating your child. There's a difference between you disciplining your child because you're mad, because you're not, again, even if a child does something wrong, it is important for you as an adult to make sure that you correct that behavior. If part of that correction is, to me, that it involves them getting a spanking, it also involves me talking to you and telling you why you are getting a spanking. Now, again, it's different between getting a spanking and getting a beating in my world. Some people, it's the same. Some people, again, they feel like, beatings can occur with a shoe, with the broom handle, whatever they can pick their hands up, right? It's just, you gonna get hit because I want to make sure I'm upset. That to me is not disciplining. That to me is not, again, making sure that as a child, you understand that there are repercussions to some behavior. I disagree that will make them then become into violent young people and violent adults. I think there is an opportunity for you to be able to use spanking for discipline. So I disagree. That is the different way that I was raised, different way that I have raised my children. I know there's a different perspective, but I do think that you can be able to have, again, healthy opportunities to discipline, and it may involve laying hands, because sometimes kids need that in order to understand that this is how we have to change behavior. Again, everyone is different, and I know there are different spectrums. Again, of how to raise your child. There's a billion books written on it, but none of them are perfect. And there's no child that's the same. So as a result, you do have to use different aspects and different ways to be able to do it. I don't agree and don't believe that you spanking your child means that they'll become a violent adult and they're going to start beating up on everybody because I got a spanking. I don't see that. But I understand your perspective. I hear you. I get it. But let me just say, on police brutality, it exists. We're going to have it as long as you have bad police officers. The same way you have, bad dentists, you have bad teachers. There are always going to be people in different professions who just don't know how to act. And again, part of that is how they were raised. They're raised to be racist. They're not going to change because they go to the police department and now become a police officer. That didn't change. They were raised to be racist. They're going to continue to be racist. It doesn't matter how many sessions they go through in the police academy and they're taught to treat people the same. They're still going to be different. You have bad apples in every profession. That doesn't mean throw everybody out. That doesn't mean defund the police. Because guess what? On January 6th, when those people rushed the Capitol, again, everybody was looking for the police. Where are the police? You can't pick and choose when you want to have police. Yes, they need to be in the right places at the right time. We want people to do the right things, but you're always going to have folks who do things wrong. And again, it can't be throw everybody out, throw the baby out with the bathwater and pretend like, again, we don't need police. We do. Again, I think if anything is about defunding them, It's about, look at some of these jurisdictions that may have 500 people that live in the city, but they get $20 million for the police force. That's the issue. Some of that money needs to then go to the schools, right? Some of that money needs to go for healthcare, but they put a lot of money into some of these places that don't even have the folks that need to support it. And that's why they enjoy and have those privileges that I don't think that, again, if people were actually able to look and see, don't deserve and should and don't need, but they feel like they have power. They're taught that they have power and power that they should not have to treat people improperly. And again, that's what needs to be addressed, but not that, again, everybody's bad, but there's definitely police brutality. It exists. But I just don't agree. And again, clearly I'm biased. My husband's a police officer. So I don't agree when someone does something wrong. They did it wrong. They were the ones that was wrong. That doesn't mean that every police officer that ever walked the face of the earth is wrong. It doesn't mean that they all think the same or act the same. They're still individuals. Yes, they're taught a police way of life. And again, that's part of why we've had a lot of conversations too, because I'm one of those people who said, can't you just shoot to wound somebody? Can't you just shoot them in the leg? Why you got to shoot in the chest? That's not how they're taught. So it's really that they'd have to be taught differently, because they're not taught to play fair. They're not taught to fight fair. They're taught to win. You come to the battle with a knife, they come with a gun. They're not taught that we're on the same level. They're just not. And as a result, it means that, again, they've got to be taught differently so that so that we understand what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to function, and we can be able to make sure we can judge them appropriately. I'm gonna stop.
I just wanted to make one quick comment, and I don't have enough knowledge about it to fully comment about this, just to piggyback off of the defunding of the police. I did see, and I have the articles bookmarked on my computer, but work has been busy the last couple of days, about some successful defunding in a sense of where money was allocated to other programming. It was started in some like smaller cities, but I know Denver just piloted a program. So there were some successful things, I think, over the last 6 months or so. Again, I had just read the abstracts. I did not read, again, sorry, science nerd, but did not read full articles. But I do encourage all of us, and the attendees included, to kind of look at some of those programs and see how successful those have been.
Awesome. All right. If there are no other comments, we want to thank you for this in-depth discussion on that particular topic. We're going to make another shift, this time into the topic of self-acceptance. Many of the people, I would say, that are attendees, I don't know how many of you, have lived through and are familiar with our history of self-acceptance as it relates to our skin tone, ranging from like the paper bag test, if you've heard of that, and having to be lighter than that bag to gain acceptance, moving to the infamous doll test, where children's preference were for lighter dolls, to today's terminology that's used of colorism, and the continued existence of this practice of favoring lighter skin over brown skin in the workforce, in dating relationships, even in the vision of creating a family. So we have a little video, very short, very quick, so pay attention real close, that we want to show to you and get your opinions and your thoughts on this.
I think we may have a sound issue.
Yeah, I don't think we can hear it, but I've seen the video before.
Okay, so I don't know whether we can try it again with sound, or otherwise we'll have Kyle tell us what they're saying in that video.
So, yeah, we'll see.
So, let's see.
Cheers to more light-skinned kids. Cheers to more light-skinned kids. Really, cheers to more light-skinned kids. Cheers to our race.
Here's to more light-skinned kids. The floor is open. The mic is open. Kyle, you're an athlete.
Yeah, I mean, that was just ignorant. I mean, I'm not even gonna speak on that. I mean, there's no way to defend that. He's just an ignorant black man, right? So, but I have a wide variety of friends. I have my college homeboys. I have my high school homeboys, and I have just, people that I've met along the way in my journey in life. And I have some friends, some African-American friends, that prefer white women over black women. If we're going to really talk about the colored disparity or whatever it is that is going on. But they prefer white women over black women. Why? I can't tell you. There really is no answer for, why they like that for the simple fact that I think it's just their preference. A lot of people use the excuse, a lot of black males use the excuse that they would prefer a white woman over a black woman for the simple fact that they think that they're less mouthy, whatever that may be, you know. And that's a topic for another discussion. But when we start talking about colorism, I just think it starts back, you know, I think Christina mentioned it earlier, back when, you know, in slavery times, when you had the field Negro and the house Negro. And, you know, the field Negro was the dark skinned, you know, men or women. And the house Negro was the, you know, the light skinned men and women. And so we were taught when we were brought over here to America to, you know, hate each other for our skin color. Right. And so that generational curse has never really left us as a people. And I think we as a people are starting to, you know, make improvements as far as coming together. You can't really go off that video because, I mean, you got obviously some bad apples in the bunch, right, Miss Laura? So, but I think we are starting to realize that black is black and black is beautiful. And that it doesn't matter what shade or tone you are, that, you know, if you're black, you're black. And you can use Obama, for example. He's half white, but he recognizes himself as a black man. Then on the other side, you can use Tiger Woods' example. He's black, but he identifies himself as I don't know what he had there, a combination. So, you know, but to us, he's a black man. He needed our help when he got in some legal trouble, right? So, you know, in society, you're going to be viewed as black. When you get in trouble, you can really figure out, you know, whether you're black or not, right? And so I guess to sum it up, to answer the question, we just as a people need to love each other for our skin tone, no matter if it's light, dark, and we need to stop wanting to be light skinned if we're dark skinned. Enjoy who you are in your skin and your flesh, and you know, move forward from there, because black is beautiful and you got to recognize that. I'll touch a little bit on my college, because my college friends, most of those guys are the guys that prefer white women over black women. So we'll talk about, you know, the race concept of that. But with them, to me personally, and this is my opinion, because most of the stuff is opinion based, I just believe that they like white women over black women because they're not capable of getting a black woman. Something about a black woman with that swag. I just, you know, I'm showing my age. I'm a little young, but, you know, there's another video I could show, but, you know, the guys that go for the white women are the guys that deserve white women, so to speak. And that's not me trying to, you know, act like white men are bad or anything, but, you know, as a people, I wouldn't say that if a black man dates a white woman, they're a sellout. But at the same time, you got to know what is taught in their households or what has been taught from their generations prior to now. And I'm not for divide. I'm not for, you know, separating, you know, races. But at the same time, it's a different conversation that I have with my wife in my household that my homeboy with his, you know, Caucasian wife has in their household. It's just certain stuff they just can't talk about and they can't say because she can't really relate to that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for me personally, I mean, it's different. And so for those guys that do that, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, you know, pray for them. And one thing I want to talk to the ladies about that I think you all miss, don't get mad at that brother for liking that white woman or that, you know, that Asian woman or that Indian woman or that Pakistan woman. Find you another man. That's what his preference is. That's what he likes and that's what he likes. Don't think you're less than or you're not worthy of because they want to date somebody else. That's just what they like. And me being a male and I try to find myself pretty cool, most of them guys are kind of corny, you know, so to speak. So that's just me talking from experience. I mean, like I said, it's opinion based, but most of the guys are a little corny. They're not who you think they are behind closed doors when you have conversations with them man to man. When women are around, conversations between men are a little different. You know, we talk a little different. We have a different vibe about how we speak around women. That's all across the board. But when it's man to man, you have a conversation about women and, you know, their preferences and stuff and, you know, talking about light skin versus dark skin. And, you know, you can tell the cornies from the reals from the fake, so to speak. So I'm going to leave it at that. And we can go into depth all day about it. But that's me talking from a male perspective and being a black male that likes black women. She went to HBCU. You heard me?
So let me piggyback just a little bit real quick, and we can go back to, you know, talking about the color. But based on what Kyle was saying, do you guys think there's a difference in perception of interracial relationships when a black woman is dating a white man versus when a black man is dating a white woman? And if so, what is that difference? Oh, Leah is smiling.
So I know Lori's about to say something, but go ahead, Lori. Go ahead. I'm the other woman. Oh no, go ahead. Please go ahead. Please go ahead. Do your thing. I'm gonna be long with it. You go, girl.
I was going to answer yes. There's no question. Yes. I mean, that definitely rolls over to us as a people working more about loving ourselves, right? And being with other Black people, regardless of the melanin and how much we have in our skin, so that, again, but then I've noticed, at least in the last few months, a lot of commercials with interracial couples, right? But more commercials with Black women and white men, less commercials with white women and Black men. I think that is still more taboo. I think that still creates a problem for Caucasians. The idea that their white women would want to be with a Black man. But I have definitely noticed that there are a lot more advertisements. The goal is to be able to show interracial relationships, and there may be more of them, right? They may be occurring more. There may be more of those groups, those relationships, those couples. But I think that there appears to be a lot more marketing where they're the blended families, right? There's the families that appear as if, again, more of the Black women with white men, that they are establishing and creating more relationships. I think it is something that is being pushed. And I think it is something that is looked at differently. I do.
Anybody else want to comment?
I'm smiling at that because it's funny, like sometimes just being transparent. When I'm with my group of girls and we're out and we see a Black man with a white woman, it is kind of like, like a roll in the eyes type response. But if you see a Black woman with a white man, it's like, go ahead, sis. Da-da-da-da. And I don't know why it's that double standard there, where it's like, it's okay if a Black woman does it, but if a Black man, maybe it's just like some, women, as Black women, sometimes we feel like, there are so many Black women to choose from, but you choose a white woman, and that could be, we could talk about that. But I'm smiling because I think it is a double standard.
Kamala Harris. Sorry to cut you off, Leah. Kamala. I mean, vice president, right? She's dating a white man. But, I could talk about that when you're done, Leah. Go ahead.
I just wanted to touch on really quick the subject of colorism. My experience with it, I truthfully did not even know what colorism was until I went to Hampton University. It was not a factor for me. And I have been in predominantly Black settings, but I do want to shout out my family. I'm the only girl in my family, so major shout out to my family, especially my dad and my brothers, because I never felt that I was not pretty enough or beautiful because of the shade or the complexion of my skin. The men that are in my life never made me question my skin tone. So it was just not a factor for me in that way. I mean, of course you grow up and you have different insecurities, but my skin complexion was not one of them until I got to Hampton University. And I remember my circle of friends at Hampton were very diverse with our skin complexions. I have light-skinned friends. I have friends that look mixed, but they're 100% Black. It's just different shades. And we were out to dinner one day, and a guy stopped by our table, and he said, "Wow, all of you are beautiful, even the dark-skinned ones." And that was the very first time I doubled, wait a minute. So wait, I'm not as pretty as my light-skinned friends? It completely changed my perspective of, my beauty and, how I viewed myself. And I think that the scales were lifted off. I was outside of the bubble, and I realized, and it is true. I think a lot of it is self-acceptance. And I think a lot of it is maturing and growing into yourself and being able to say, people do have preferences, people do have preferences. I think the conversation where we would have to have it is when light skin is the standard of beauty, or light skin is, superior to dark skin. I think that's when it needs to be a conversation. And that's when I think it is important, the role of, especially when we're looking at men who are calling women this, it is important to have the men in your life affirm you in that way, to say, listen, no matter what skin complexion you are, your Black is beautiful. And I think that helped me as far as that not being a major factor of an insecurity for me, because I was affirmed that way, which helped me have better self-acceptance and grow in that maturity to say, you know what, I'm not pretty for a dark-skinned woman. I'm just a beautiful Black woman.
I will quickly piggyback off of that. I'm sure many of you know that Leah is actually my best friend. And I remember being in college, which I also went to a PWI like Kyle. And I remember her calling me when we were in college and telling me that story. And I was like, what? Like literally had never felt that I had experienced colorism. What I experienced in school was more culturalism, which is a whole separate conversation where because I can identify as Black versus not knowing where my family's country of origin may be. That is what I experienced because I wasn't an islander or I wasn't, from, wherever. That was more what I struggled with. So it was literally a phenomenon when Leah called. I'm like, wait, they said what? However, I recognize now that, again, how Leah said the scales have fallen as I have like grown more into this Black power mode. And, as time has progressed in my life over the last couple decades, I recognize that it is everywhere. I was just home with my parents and my niece is 15 and she told my sister like, and my sister is fair skinned. She's like, oh, this will work for you because you have that light skin hair. And I'm like, what are you saying? Literally. So then I climbed up on my soapbox and she's 15. So she walked away. Didn't really care what I had to say. Didn't stop me from talking though. So you have issues like that. But then I look at my mom, whose parents, my mom is mixed, though her dad, because of they grew up like in poverty, her dad was white, grew up in a Black area because they did not have money. So he felt Black. So he then it's very like deeply entrenched. So when my mom talked, like my mom, you cannot tell my mom that she is not 100% dark skinned when she is extreme, like fair skinned, you know what I mean? So it's just very interesting, even that dynamic of how they just like from them, we don't see why, even though literally we go to a family reunion and it's 70% white and 30% Black. So it's just very, very interesting, just the different dynamics that you see, even generationally.
Great. Any other thoughts? I have a bit of a follow-up, so maybe this will spur some thinking. We talk about allyship and like wanting white people to be allies for us. But we often don't really, and speak up for us in the workplace when we're being mistreated or when they see something, something happening when we're in a store and being able to speak up for us when, if we say something, they're going to treat us differently. But I don't think we often talk about as a community, like what allyship looks like within the Black community. And so I wonder if any of you have thoughts about, what responsibility do lighter skinned Black people have when it comes to combating colorism and being allies to darker skinned Black people?
I want to jump in really quick. The other side to that is part of why I felt like I didn't experience that, because even in my friend circle, even now I have, light-skinned friends. I won't name them on this call to put them out there, but I have light-skinned friends who I've never felt like they've carried this air about them that they felt like they were better because of the complexion of their skin. They're always complimenting, always just like a sisterhood. And I think that when we talk about allyship within our race, I think it is very important in those ways to affirm and to, just make sure that when we're lifting each other up, it's not specific to the color of your skin or, beauty is beauty. And I know that can seem kind of naive, but it will be normalized if we normalize it. And I think that I'm just grateful in that way to have a friend circle. And I think in general, I just wouldn't surround myself by people who made me feel that way. But I do feel like my friends that, because we come in so many different shades, to me is just the beauty of Blackness, that we're not just one shade. We don't just have one hair texture. And I think to see how people work with what they have is beautiful. How you can, do different hairstyles with different hair textures, do different things. And I think that if we're more accepting and we're more affirming to each other, regardless. I know how some people might look at it like, well, I don't see color. I think it's clear there are some light skin, dark skin, brown skin, whatever. It's okay to acknowledge the complexion, but again, to speak on it as if that is the standard, like all light skinned women are beautiful. maybe not so. No shade. Maybe not so. But it's but it's not about that. It's just to affirm, especially when you're calling someone your friend. I think that in general, the goal is to just affirm, period, not because the color of your complexion. It's just affirming in that way. I don't know if that answers the question. It did in my head. I'm sorry.
It did. It did.
Thank you.
I'm a co-sign for you. I think, again, it's one of those kind of things that how you were raised. I think the people you were around, and again, to your point, Leah, your circle, your family. Again, I was not raised in a family that did speak about variations of color. It was not an issue. I also had a mom who only gave me black dolls and would not allow anyone to give me a doll that was not a black doll. And so it was from the beginning, this is what I look like, and I have a doll and I have toys that look like me. So there wasn't even a question about how come I'm not playing with someone, how come I don't have dolls that look like me. I always did. And it was not until later, not as late as going to college, but it's not until later that, again, it was that experience of, you're cute for a brown skinned girl. I'm surprised that, you hang around her because she's light skinned. I thought only light skinned girls hang around each other. And it is. It is similar to the old movie School Days, where, again, you are put against one another. And again, it is that same mentality, that same slave mentality that we have carried on. But in answer to your question, I don't necessarily think that there's a responsibility of someone who's not considered light skinned to make sure someone who is not understands, unless they are saying something or doing something that is categorically inappropriate. I think, especially if they're your friend, then I think you should have that conversation. If they're really your friend, then I think that would be an opportunity for you to say, is that really how you feel? He's cute for a dark-skinned guy. It's okay to be with dark-skinned guys. You don't want to be with anybody light-skinned because you don't want to have light-skinned babies. You want to be with a dark-skinned guy because then you make sure those conversations do occur. Let's be real. They occur. They do. And it doesn't make it right. And it doesn't mean that that's actually who you're going to be with, because we all say that we have preferences and that we may be attracted to a certain thing or even have a certain type. But 9 times out of 10, that's not really who you end up being with, because common sense prevails. And that may not be who you end up being attracted to or who's attracted to you. And you realize that beauty is so much more than just, again, skin deep. And as a result, again, unless someone is doing something to me that is just egregious, I don't think we have a necessarily responsibility to fix it. I think the things that we do, the behaviors that we have, that we're showing the actions and people see from us, or even the things that, that we talk about and how we interact, I think that is the lesson, how we can show it. Not necessarily that, again, if we have the power to make a commercial, then we can be able to show, again, people who are, of all the same race, but different melanins together and enjoying each other's company that way. It's not, all the girls together, all the same shade, and that's how come they can get along. If you have the power to be able to make differences that way, to influence that. But otherwise, no, I don't think that there's a responsibility to make sure people know that you need to treat people this way. I don't.
So I want to follow up real quick because we have some questions from the audience. I want to ask Kyle this question. Do you think colorism affects men the same way? The light-skinned brothers, the tan brothers, dark-skinned brothers. Is it an issue for you guys?
Well, if it did affect the brothers, then I think I'm on the right side of that fence, because it seems like everybody likes dark-skinned men. I'm just saying. But I don't really see. You kind of hear it. You see it sometimes. You say, "Oh, well, I like dark-skinned guys over light-skinned guys because light-skinned guys are more feminine." You hear it. You see it. But I don't. It doesn't. Having a conversation with my friends, having a conversation in my group chats with my homies. It's not a big factor with us as far as people coming up and saying, "Oh, you cute for dark skin," or "You're cute for a light skin guy." That doesn't affect us at all. And I guess it's just the mentality of guys that we don't really. My group of friends, we don't think about stuff like that. We don't look at it like that. I would say that a lot of different ethnic groups outside, African Americans, obviously, they like Black men. And that's why that's such a big topic as to why Black men date outside of their race. It's the attention they get from other women because, Black women, sometimes they play the hard to get role, right? My daddy told me I shouldn't chase that man because, I'm worthy. He should, be the man and come talk to me type stuff, right? And so when you see that and you see the white woman coming, oh, you're so cute. And, he's like, oh, shoot, you talking to me, but she's not. Okay, I'll buy you a drink. And so, it's a lot of dynamics that play into that. And, we can go on and on about that conversation. But I think Miss Lori may have said it, but it's all about what they see when they grow up, too. You may have grown up. Some of these guys that prefer white women or prefer non-Black women are people that may have grew up, not around Black people. They may have grew up in a predominantly white area. And so that may be all they saw, or, they may watch or may have had teachers that were all white. And growing up as a young boy, they may have been attracted to their teacher because their teacher was, the person that talked to them every day. You never know. Their counselor that they confided into may have been a white lady. So they might like white women just because for that matter. But to answer the question, going back to the things I'll get off, but I don't think it doesn't affect men like that as far as, I'm dark skinned. I think she prefer a light skin over, dark skin because, people think Chris Brown is handsome and people think Morris Chestnut's handsome. One's light skin, one's dark skin. It's your preference. But I don't think it affects us from a colorism standpoint at all. I don't.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you so much. All right. We want to be mindful of the time. Oh, yes. Go ahead, Leah.
I just want to make a quick comment to that. I had a conversation with a friend, and he happens to be of like a very dark skin complexion, and he married a light skinned woman. And he jokes about it, but he said that he couldn't marry a dark skinned woman because even though he finds dark skinned women attractive, he was concerned about the complexion of his children. And so, that signaled to me where it was like, oh, wow. So some men do have this complex as well, where they feel like, they are concerned about the complexion. And I think that some of it came from him being teased growing up of his skin.
That's what I was going to say, Leah. That's what I was going to say, but yeah.
So I just want to add that comment.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask one last question, taking us into the field of entertainment, so that we can be mindful of the time and respect everybody's evening. Think about this. Reality TV is now a common staple of our TV viewing. And Black women have made a mark in that area, in the Real Housewives franchises, and the Married to Medicine franchises, Basketball Wives, that's just to name a few. They're successful, they're professional, family-oriented, community-oriented women who sometimes devolve into screaming and name-calling and physical fighting. Talk about the impact of these shows on our community and our affinity towards watching them.
Can I phone in a friend? Call my wife. I'm just y'all go ahead and talk about it. She loves them housewives shows, and I'm like, can you turn that down? But that's another topic. I'm not a woman, so I'll let y'all handle it.
I'm gonna just jump out there real quick and say, the ones I watch are because I want mindless entertainment. Mindless. I think the majority of them are a hot mess. I'm disappointed. I get sad, but then I watch it because it's a train wreck and it's like you want to see it. But it's sad because they're predominantly Black women portrayed as angry and fight. And again, we're talking about the way that Leah was talking about kids in Chicago being taught how to use their words. Most of the time they don't use their words. They want to fight and they think this is how they get, again, and it is how they get more time on TV. It does produce them getting paid more per episode. They do get more social media attention. And so, yes, it gives them the wrong message. You've got somebody like Cardi B, who started off reality TV. When she was on her show, there were subtitles constantly because you couldn't understand what she said. But we still watched. And then she got a record deal. And it was like, no, is it possible? Can it happen? And knowing from whence she came, that again, that was a success story for all success stories. So everybody now feels like they can be the next Cardi B. Everybody wants to be able to do that. Again, they do not portray the best impression of women at all. The majority of them are women because most men are like, I'm not putting up with this foolishness. I don't want nobody to see me at home. I want to relax. I don't want to have to pretend like I get dressed up every day and get hair done and nails done. You got to pay for that. Who wants to go through all of that? And you got more people believing that that's real. That's not how people really live. It's just not. No one in my world pays to get hair and nails and their face done just to go to the store, because that's what these people do. I mean, when they try to get together to say we're going out to dinner, they're going to lunch. I mean, they got on all the clothes, designer this, just to go meet up to go eat. It's not real. They all have
me and my friends do that, but that's just that's because we bougie. Because that's why we.
Is that what it is?
Especially after Corona stop, I'm wearing everything Fendi, Gucci, Balenciaga just because I can.
Just because you need to put it on. I just think it definitely shows and makes people think that that's reality. It's not reality. These things are, to me, more scripted and staged than ever before, and it's not really how people live. And it makes other people think that that is how you live, how you're supposed to live, or that's how you should aspire to be. And again, the shows that you mentioned, you're married to medicine, but you're married to it. What are you doing? I mean, it's, again, some of them, to me, mindless. I watch them. So I watch them, but it's not because it's positive. It's not because it's, the Cosby Show. It's, it's got to be after certain hours, after the kids are asleep, after, it can't be regular primetime TV. That's my perspective.
All right. Is there a different perspective on these ladies and their success on TV?
I mean, I think it's real for a certain set of people. Like, there are some things that me and my friends do that, I mean, we go out, we do, even before Corona, we would go out and like have girl dates and get dressed up for each other, because I don't need to get dressed up to put myself on display for a man, even my husband. Like, I sometimes just want to be cute. So me and my girls go out and like go to DC Improv, go have dinner beforehand, or, go see a play or whatever. So I think it's somebody's truth. It's not everybody's truth. I think sometimes we watch them for aspirational purposes in some ways. Like, people, who doesn't want to be able to afford $100,000 car on a Tuesday? Who doesn't want to be able to go on a $20,000 shopping spree? Now, I will say that a lot of this stuff is fake. It's like how we used to look at WWE back in the day, thinking that's real. And then we found out years later, no, everything was so scripted. These shows are super scripted, to the point where they'll tell people to recreate things. So it's important to kind of keep in mind that this is literally just entertainment. And some of it is, like, oh, I wish I had a house like that. But I think one of the problems are some people think that it's real, and they think this is how you act in order to get famous. So you really have to check the people around you. And really, I mean, children who are watching this, and really explain to them, like, this is as fake as you watching a movie about Hannah Montana being Hannah Montana one day and then whatever she was the next day. Like, how that's fake? This is fake as well. So I want you to go in it thinking that this is not what you're going to be in real life on a TV show and making all this money. So it's just, some people's reality. I like to think it's mine, but
I was just going to say really quick, I'm going to tread lightly because I do watch the entire Housewives franchise. I'm not going to lie. Hey, Ash, we watched it together. But I think it too just depends on, like, I guess in the context of this panel, like, how are we represented? Because I watch a lot of the Housewives, and people who don't look like us be having real drama. It's not real drama. Their drama is like, oh my gosh, I'm not able to take the Porsche today. But there's other things going on with people who are not Black on their shows as well. I think one show that I do want to touch on, like Love and Hip Hop, I can't get with that personal reality show. And people can say the same thing about Housewives of Atlanta. So I'm not going to say it's tomato. It depends on your preference. I can't get with how we're represented on Love and Hip Hop, because I think it's blatant of toxic relationships. I think there's, it escalates from 0 to 100, and it is very clear, like, they promote, people, using their fists instead of their words on that show. And I just think that it is not a good representation of us. It's more disturbing, I think, than it is entertaining or funny, I would say. But that's just my personal opinion on it. God has not delivered me yet from the reality thing, so I don't want to talk too much on it, sound like a hypocrite. But yeah, if it's funny to me, it's funny. But I do agree. I think at some point, if it does misrepresent us, and especially if it's implanting something in our youth that is making them feel like, you know, they're not good enough where they are, or they have to be somewhere else, or is creating this false perception of what we should be doing, then of course I disagree. But again, you know, I enjoy it, and I'm just gonna be honest.
We appreciate you for your honesty, and we appreciate all the panelists for their time and their honesty and their candor tonight. I think this has been a really great discussion, and we've got lots of varying opinions, but we are going to wrap it up here to be respectful of everyone's time and not go too far into the evening. It is a work night and a school night. We're going to close out in prayer.
Right. And we want to invite all of the audience who is listening to join us next week, next Thursday, same time, same place, for our second town hall series entitled Jesus in Therapy. So come back. But if everybody can just bow their heads, close their eyes. Father, we just want to thank you for this opportunity to have this discussion this evening and to gain a greater insight and an understanding around what concerns us about us. We pray that despite all the world says about us, we remember and hold on to what you say above all else, that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Father, we pray that we gave you glory, Lord, tonight, and that we will continue to be the light so that those who see us will ask, what must they do to be saved? We thank you in Jesus' name and with thanksgiving. Amen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.